All right, we are officially live. RTD News midday. Me and Mike and Paul trying to figure out an official name for how to announce it, but we are live. So I'm excited to connect this afternoon. And so got a couple of topics I want to cover. And once again, it's one of those things where I kind of saw it coming ahead of time and it's just right on time. And so it has to do with the whole Chinese situation, the health scare out there and the impacts it's going to have on the economy. And what better way to include health scare along with the paper units there. So, Mr. Half Dollar, how you doing this afternoon, my friend?
Doing good today, Mike. I can't get the camera right on this one, though, but it's good to talk to you again. I mean, every 24 hours, there's just so much stuff that's hitting the news cycle that it's just hard to keep up with everything. So it's good we're trying our best to keep people informed here today.
Yes, that is key. So information is key because it gives people a chance to better process and to plan and strategize for themselves as opposed to waiting for it to come from people who read off teleprompters. And so, as always, no teleprompters here, just straight off the top of our head. So I want to take a minute to acknowledge a couple people for taking time to join us. Looks like we have Mr. James Anderson tuning in a little bit. So, Mr. Anderson, I appreciate you for hanging out with us as well as joining me last week on the show. And then we got Glenn, we got Stens, Maynard, we got Kenneth. And so we got enough here to get started. So as always, the very topic, as you guys can see beneath us right here is China crisis to start digital Yuan rollout. And so this stems from an article that I came across yesterday that I think was initially posted on an activist post. But one of the things I'm not surprised at all. And so I actually going to put it on screen a little bit because I reshared it on the Rethinking the Dollar blog. And I want to get your thoughts on it, Mr. Half Dollar, and we will touch on it. Let me move some of this stuff out the way. And so here we have on the screen here. There we go. All right. So cashless agenda. China is scrubbing cash notes to stop virus from spreading so its paper money won't kill you. And so are you surprised, to say the least, that it looks like cash in the Wuhan area will be something of a target that they will look to remove and wash and clean and more than likely not put it back in circulation? But is this something that surprises you at all?
It doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, I'm quite expecting it. And, I've seen some of those images, right, where it shows like, you got the Chinese with the masks on and they're spraying down like a briefcase full of cash with like, I guess I'm assuming is bleach to disinfect it. But this doesn't come as a surprise whatsoever because, the traditional line has been, we got to get rid of cash because it's only really used by drug dealers and terrorists and gun runners and all these other criminals, right? But that's not really the good enough excuse because, that's just a lame excuse and anybody can see through that. So what better excuse to say, well, now there's this added risk that it could be contaminated with a virus that the human species has no prior defense of or immune response to.
Yeah. So looking through some of this article here, I highlighted, says the disinfected fiat cash will also need to be kept in quarantine for a period of 7 to 14 days before it can be reintroduced to the public. And so here's the thing that's way out there possibly. If actual human beings can contract the virus again a second time, what's the likelihood that they can actually disinfect the fiat cash and then quarantine it and then reintroduce it back into circulation? So it's just one of those things where it just sounds crazy because why not just outright say that, let's just remove the cash in general, because how can you really disinfect it when you're not able to actually even help cure your own people from this virus completely without it being a threat of returning? So it's more stuff that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, it reminds me like those little casual games. I've never really been a gamer on like the iPhones and the Androids for the apps, but that like game is like a waiter or waitress game, and it's like they got to like wait on the tables, and then you got to go back and get the food, then take it out to the table, then you got to go back and get this and take it out to the table. And more people keep coming into the restaurant. You got to keep bringing them food. And there comes a point where you just get overwhelmed because you can't keep up with anything. That's exactly what's going to happen here with the cash. You got cash coming in, you got to quarantine it, put it to the side. Then you got cash coming in, you got cash going out. And they're never going to be able to keep up with that. It's just, for all intents and purposes, something that's totally impossible, but they're not going to miss seizing on that opportunity.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, their monetary size financial situation is very dire. Like the fact that they're creating excess reserves to prop everything up, and if everything comes to a halt, like it appears like it is, I'm not sure. To your knowledge, is it like certain areas that have been heavily impacted, or is like all China, all provinces throughout the entire country, like on shutdown? Are there some provinces, to your knowledge, outside the highly infected areas that are still in operations, or is like everything shut down from what you've gathered?
Well, most things are shut down. I don't know the full extent to the shutdowns, and it's interesting because, as you know, I keep bringing up this January 20th date. We've been talking about this for a month now, and the quality of the information that's coming out is just getting worse and worse, and we're left with more questions than we are with answers. Because we were talking about, today Beijing's on lockdown. There's 11 million people. That's added to the Wuhan that's been on lockdown, and now Shenzhen's on lockdown, and now Zhongyang and all these other Chinese names are on lockdown. And the point with that is it got up to 500 million people, 400 million people on lockdown, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of faded from the news, right? So, the narrative is taking a really bad turn here for the worse. And just information is fewer and far between, and it's of lesser quality. I do want to lead into where this is headed with this push to eliminate cash, because you've been talking about this several times over the past couple weeks. It's just this little article I put together this morning on Silver Doctors. And I'm just going to, I don't know if I can put that in the chat. I'll just put it in this private chat right here. Let me see here. Oh, I hit the wrong button and I inspected the page instead. Okay. This is just a little article that I put up on Silver Doctors this morning, but think about this, right? Because you've been talking about this. Here's the context that you put it in. What happens if you're flying home or something and, you get off the plane and, you're chewing a piece of gum and you swallow it wrong and you just start coughing a little bit. And all of a sudden, sir, we need you to step aside. Have you been in Wuhan lately? So here's the thing with that, right? Now it's even more Orwellian than that. It's more Orwellian than that. I'm going to read the key takeaway from this Global Times tweet.
All right, go ahead.
Authorities are tracking down people who bought fever or cold medicine since January 20th. So think about that. Think about that. You don't have to have a cough. You don't have to have a sniffle. You don't have to have anything. If you just bought some cough drops, because maybe you were thinking, hey, maybe I could use a little bit of cough drops or something because I don't have them. And if I get sick, I don't really want to have a cough. Nope. So this is the whole push to get people on a digital currency, because how easy is it to track down people who have bought fever and cold medicine since January 20th? It's a piece of cake, Mike.
Yeah. And isn't this like flu season for like every country above the equator that's, more likely, experiencing some type of seasonal changes with, from winter to spring and all that stuff like that. So like right now, I saw something not long ago about the amount of deaths just related to the flu itself. Is going to be a problem. Now, will that also be associated with this current health situation from that region? Like, how will they distinguish between a person having, just a severe flu symptoms as opposed to the actual virus itself? And is it all in one nature something that can be used as a way of really beginning to clamp down on everybody, because you can't distinguish the difference? Everyone more than likely will have a fever. Everyone will have a cough, and everyone might have runny nose, dry eyes, or whatever your typical symptoms might be. But they're going to lump it all up into one category where they're going to want to quarantine you type of thing.
Yes. And think about all the people that don't get tested, the people that are just sent to the quarantine centers and immediately die, or the people who die in their homes or out and about. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to say real quick. You play that little video there. Well, you don't even really have to play it, but it just shows 3 cops walking down the street. One of them just collapses. So what if you bought some cough drops, right, on January 20th because you thought maybe it would be good to have some cough drops, and you're not sick, nobody in your family is sick, but then all of a sudden, a police officer comes up to inspect you to scan your forehead fever temperature, but he was sick, so now he got you sick, right? You see what I'm saying? So it's like, this is just, when it's like Ron Paul said this one time. He said, like, when you create one regulation, you create the simultaneous need for 2 more. So, and it's like what I say, the government can either get in the way or get out of the way. So in this case, the government, if they're sending over sick people to scan your forehead, well, that's making the situation worse. It's not making it any better.
Now, watch this. This picture here shows 2 people that don't appear to have a mask. I don't think from this picture here, it doesn't like the gentleman to the left has a mask on, but he's scanning the forehead of the person in front of him who has a mask on. And so what exactly would the temperature need to be to say, okay, you look like you might be sick? And so we need you to come with us. Like, what's the actual temperature? Is it like the typical flu type symptom temperature where you're running a fever of, over, 100 degrees or whatever it might be? But, so does just a higher number mean that you're infected just because you're in our region, and it not be like, you're just having, the flu. You're just a little warm today. Like that fine line there makes it very hard to distinguish between someone who's infected and someone who's just going through some issues for that day. So real sketchy. And whatever's going on there, it could easily come here and really be a problem.
Yeah, and I mean, several things on top of that. What about the margin of error on the equipment that you're using to test for a fever, right? If that's off by 1 degree, right, then all of a sudden that's the difference between sir, come with us to sir, have a nice day, right? Yeah. So there's just a lot of trust and faith being put in these systems that are prone to failure here. Yeah. And when it comes to the United States, yeah, I mean, it's inevitable at this point. I don't see how we're not going to have it bad here. And, still not a case in Mexico or anywhere in Latin America, Mike. Is that a surprise?
Yeah. And that's one of the things where is it just because we're not being told, or there are no cases? What do you think?
I don't know. I think it's a couple things. I think it is also just down to the fact that, do they even have the proper testing equipment? Because remember, like, the CDC's response to this has been horrible. They didn't have the test equipment for a while. They're having lots of problems with the test equipment. So that's one of the considerations. And, to think it's not coming here, I read a report today that said that Heathrow Airport, which is a major airport in London, I've flown in there before many moons ago, but it's like the Hyatt or the Holiday Inn or one of these major hotels at the airport that's being like commandeered by the British government, and that's being used as a quarantine center in London.
Really?
Yeah. So, people are preparing for this. We're preparing for it with those bases all around the United States. But yeah, I mean, if they're preparing for it, but they're saying not worry, they're saying, it's coming here.
Oh, interesting. So along with this, okay, so we have everything that's been placed on the surface. So on the surface, as I always mention, the most important thing to everyone that's tuning in, everyone that is hearing about this, is their own health. How will this impact my health? And so this is the ultimate diversion tactic from everything else that plays into everything we've been talking about. Is just on the back end, the monetary system is being changed, and there's a plan to that. And so I want to get into that next article that I wanted to highlight on this subject matter here. And it has to do, as I pull up on the screen here, with what is rolled out as some predictions for China's role of this quarantine of the cash, and them washing it and trying to put it in quarantine and then putting it back out 2 weeks later. At the same time, where majority of the population there already use their phone for mobile payments, so cash is not really something that is heavily used over there. So I don't really see that quarantine cash being brought back into circulation the way that they mentioned that it will. I think the reason they have to say that is because they don't want people to panic, and the whole cashless society push really takes off, in the Chinese example. But here's something here that I thought was very interesting. It says IDC makes 10 predictions for China's blockchain sector, 10% of Chinese cities to use digital currency by 2023. And so this is just a forecast here, but it's one of those things where if you connect all the dots together, you see a ideal situation where this can be sped up, and all in the name of protecting the public from health scare, because currencies carry viruses and whatever else. And so there's a lot of things here that's of interest. And so there's a tier of what looks like, by this blockchain situation here, or whatever they're going to call it, becoming public, they're not going to need the SWIFT anymore. And now, how do you think the U.S. will feel if the Chinese government officially removes themselves out of the SWIFT payment system, even though they have the chips, the Chinese interbank, whatever? And so it says by 2023, 40% of China first-tier financial institutions will use blockchain networks for node-to-node processing of cross-border payments, bypassing SWIFT and central bank infrastructure. So how do you think the U.S. will respond to this, given the fact that it looks like the U.S. and China don't trust each other as to who started this, even though they could be both being on at the same time? Is this a part of the game, you think, or is this a byproduct of something that happens to just be by chance? This with this health scare situation.
Good questions.
That's
Those
a
are all
lot.
good questions. It is a lot. Here's the first thing, right? The very first thing about how the U.S. responds to this. The U.S. is not going to like this whatsoever at all, because remember, one of the most powerful weapons the U.S. has is the weaponized dollar. And how do they
Yeah.
take advantage of the weaponized dollar? Well, they eliminate and deny countries and nations and people from being able to have access to the SWIFT system at all. So that's how sanctions are enforced. One of the ways that sanctions are enforced is by using SWIFT as the mechanism to block countries and targeted individuals and agencies from doing the transactions. So absolutely. But then again, if we're talking about what some people talk about, the rise of like a multipolar or a bipolar world, then, I can see the US in its realm with the SWIFT system, and then the China-Russia realm with I can't remember the Chinese interbank payment system, or the CHIPS or the SIPS, or I can't remember the exact acronym. So that could go either way. One of the ways is it could be like just kind of like a managed retreat of the globalists, where the U.S. has SWIFT in the Western sphere of influence and China has theirs in the Eastern sphere of influence. So, but the individual nodes, obviously they have to go through several nodes, because you got to go through multiple servers to make an international transaction happen. But obviously that would be encrypted from end to end there. So that's why that would be there. But, so this is all coming. And the thing that frustrates me the most about it is, distributed ledger. Well, I guess you can say that that's a new technology, even though there's been ledgers that have been distributed, just not in electronic format since the, dawn of time, essentially. And this whole encryption, it's like we already have these infrastructures there and built up, but they're just making it sound as if this is all this completely, totally new thing. But end-to-end encryption, digital currency, all of this stuff has been around for decades.
Yeah. Now, another thing about this that's very interesting is that it's for cross-border payments, which means there's going to be other nations that have to sign off on this and get on board. And we know Russia and China work, closely together. And so the question will be, how many other nations will all the other countries, and I want to say, was it 160 countries or 60, whatever the number total recognized countries, they'll all have to sign on to this cross-border payment system in order to do transactions with China, especially if they're leading the way when it comes to the manufacturing of, every product that's shipped around the world. And therefore, that would be the end of the petrodollar system in a sense, because along with that payment structure would come in energy as well. So oil prices might be problematic for the dollar, because once again, I can see China saying we no longer necessarily need dollar payments. So, but the timing on this, 2023. Now, what's the likelihood that if we get to 2023? Because if this is a forecast, this is a prediction by some type of think tank, the International Data Corporation. They're the ones just came out with this information of what they know. So what's the chance that this health scare speeds this up?
Yeah, I think if anything, it would be sped up as opposed to delayed. And as far as on your point with, are other countries going to sign on to this? Absolutely going to sign on to this, because what are we talking about here? We're talking about diversification, right? That's like a buzzword in the investing community, but we're talking about a diversification of payment systems, right? So whereas, I tell you, I could give you some cash, or I could give you some gold, or I could give you some silver, right? Diversification of the payment system means I'm going to have access and I can use the SWIFT system, or I'm going to have access and I'm going to use the SIP system. So absolutely countries are going to sign on to this. There's no way that you wouldn't, because if you don't sign on to it, then you're basically denying economic opportunity to yourself.
Yeah. Now, and so here we have the idea, we have the groundwork being laid for the removal of cash, because of the fact that you have a tangible item that can carry something, health. So ultimately, what it's saying is that your cash could kill you if when the whole quarantine Chinese situation. But yet the Federal Reserve note happens to be the most widely spread currency in physical form as well as in digital form, scattered all across the planet. And so what's the likelihood that our current governmental structure here, as well as the central bank, play on this same narrative of we're concerned for your health, because all those dollars that exist outside this country will be heading back here to invest or for whatever reasons. And when it comes back, it's going to be coming back from Asians that have been infected. And out of concern for your health, we want to make sure that those dollars don't contaminate and become a problem. So we're going to remove them out of circulation, and you can turn them in for a Fed coin.
That's a very interesting point that you make there, because everybody talks about the flood of dollars coming back, but if those flood of dollars are contaminated, then we don't want that kind of tsunami at all. As far as the theoretical senses go, and think about this too. Why is that not only possible, but actually probably, probable or a likely course of action? Think about when high definition television came about, right? I mean, it's a process, and it's a process where slowly but surely analog was phased out, and then it became purely digital, and the government had a role in that. And for a while there, they were given those subsidies where you get I think it was I even signed up for one once because I got that digital converter box. They gave you a $40 voucher. I don't even remember that way back in the early aughts, in the early 2000s. But, there is precedence for these shifts in what was the standard procedure to what it is now. So the shift to move us out of cash, absolutely, they're going to want to try that.
Yeah. Now, so here's the thing: out of concern, because the big diversion is your health. So everything we're going to experience probably moving forward will be health related. So everything that's going to be thrown at us as a suggestion to solve our problems will be, we want to protect you from this scare because your health is more important than us. But we're going to need a little bit more. We're going to need a little bit more authority to implement these things. And so, as I did a video, I think over the weekend about what's his name, Jerome Powell, sharing his thoughts on cryptocurrency and things of that nature and where he thinks this is going. So there's some regulations about to be given that will help redefine and position the narrative of blockchain and cryptocurrency in the public hands. They're going to redefine that. And they're also looking into the Fed coin. And so I can see, for example, this health concerns going deeper to where we end up hearing about the announcing or the launching or the official rollout of the Fed coin or whatever coin come this summer or fall, especially heading into the presidential campaign cycle, if this health situation continues to escalate. Could you imagine dealing with a health scare in the middle of summer and it's blazing hot outside and everybody's forced to quarantine themselves? And as you want to talk about the ramifications of the economic slowdown, imagine how bad of a world we'll be in, because if people aren't going outside in the summertime out of scare for their health, we're going to be setting up for a hell of a summer in a not so good way.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody this morning, talking just about, how do we know this is the economic collapse, or how do we know it's just not a global slowdown? And one of the things that I started thinking about recently is watch the Summer Olympics in Tokyo in 2020. Because if the Summer Olympics in Tokyo 2020 are canceled, then we know that this is pretty much the economic collapse and not just a slowdown. And I guess when I say the economic collapse, I'm talking about just a very nasty, severe global economic depression that's going to be altering the course of everybody's lives. Everybody's lives are going to be different coming on out of the other side of this. Yeah. And it's also interesting. I just want to bring up a side note, but something that I thought about. People talk about intrinsic value, and I just want to say one thing, because people talk about, Bitcoin could or could not have intrinsic value, but I would say that Bitcoin's intrinsic value is actually negative. And why is it actually negative? Because it requires electricity to, after the fact, to continue transacting with that Bitcoin, whereas a stamped gold or silver coin, there is no more electricity required to transact from that, other than physically handing it to somebody and the amount of energy it would take to do that. So that's just something to throw out there, because I'm sure we're going to start talking because here's the thing, right? When they start rolling these out, they're going to start throwing out all these words, right? They're going to be like, oh no, it's great, and this and that. And someone's going to be like, well, how do I know if it doesn't have intrinsic value, or how do I know that it's real money, or how can I be confident in the system? So, these are all things that we need to be thinking about and preparing for here. And that's just something I thought about, because people like to talk about intrinsic value and what is money and what's money. And for some reason, I just started thinking about that. Bitcoin is actually negative intrinsic value when you think about it, because of the ongoing need for electricity and a network connection.
Yeah, and so I couldn't argue with that. So I'm sure we have a couple of crypto enthusiasts in the audience that might want to challenge you there. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll try to touch on that. And so I actually want to, because I was reading through the chat as you're speaking, and someone mentioned about the probably the likelihood of the Fed coin or whatever, they're going to try to roll out, it's going to be based upon a stable coin. That's what they're going to use a narrative of. And so the question or the thought was, how will that really play out in a world where we have debit and credit cards, when you swipe it, you're creating digital dollars. And so I think there's going to be a rebranding of how the system operates when it comes to who gets the benefit of issuing that particular coin or digital transaction. And so as of right now, the Federal Reserve issues they back the reserves that's created and brought into existence by the fractional banking lending model. So all the debits and credits on the commercial bank's ledger is what the Federal Reserve backs up with the actual printing of paper or whatnot. So I think in issuing a Fed coin, they're probably going to remove a little bit of the control the commercial banks have and extending loans that brings in currency to existence. Mm-hmm. And so my thing will be, there'll probably be they'll probably let some of the banks go under. Like, the too big to fail banks, their liabilities at this point because of the derivatives exposure and all that gambling stuff that they've created. So I can actually see them allowing some of those banks to go under. And then with that, all the so-called assets that people think they have in those accounts will be washed away. And the savior could easily be the Federal Reserve, the lender and purchaser of last resort. They can come in and reassure or re-back up all those things with the issuance now of a Fed coin. And then they'll have control over that Fed coin, and then they can funnel it through the banks and say, hey, these are now reassured and insured by the Treasury, use these stable coins issued by the Fed. You can no longer, fractional reserve these type of things to reinstate that confidence. So I can see the Federal Reserve issuing the Fed coin to back up the banks when they fail, reinstating confidence back into the public, and the public not knowing the difference between their digital dollars and the Fed coins because it's all digital anyway.
I can see that too. And I can also see it like the Fed actually working hand in glove with the government on this, in a sense that when these banks go under, hey, FDIC insurance is here. What we're doing is we're modernizing FDIC for the 21st century. So those deposits from those banks that got under, those are insured with FedCoin, right? So it's like an official push to get it rolled out. Right. So, and, there's precedents for changing names, right? It used to be called a silver certificate. I don't know if it was a silver certificate first or just a dollar first. Well, it was a dollar, obviously, in the coinage act of 1790. But the point is, it got switched to a Federal Reserve note. So absolutely, it can get switched to a Federal Reserve coin or Fed coin for short, right? So, I can totally see that. And, because think of how much of a mess it would be to sort out FDIC, assuming banks start going under. I mean, that you're talking about people, if you got any kind of serious money, which, that's what asset price inflation is, right? There's been a bubble in asset prices, especially paper, debt-based, unbacked fiat currency assets, such as equities and things like that. So, it can be easy to roll this out in the crisis because people would be willing to accept the money faster as opposed to waiting for this long bureaucratic process to get settled through FDIC.
Yeah, now that FDIC is for the overall the health of our financial economy when it comes to reassuring the bank depositors and bank investors. But then you have the biggest problem, well, not one of the biggest problems, but for the baby boomer generation, you got the PBGC, the pension benefit guarantee corporation, which also is similar to FDIC. They secure a lot, but don't have no funding. And so it'll be an easy way to provide liquidity for the PBGC as the pension system unravel, because states and all those promises will be wiped away as well. Therefore, I think the public, especially the baby boomers, because they just want to receive what they were promised, which is rightfully due to them. They just want to receive some payouts. So they'll take whatever, they'll take anything digital as long as it spins, they'll take it, because you either take whatever they give you or you lose everything. And I think it'll be easier for the baby boomers to step right in and continue to transact with the cards, but just the cards be a blockchain based whatever, issued and controlled by the Federal Reserve System. So I can see something like that being rolled over quite easily because it's in the midst of chaos. So and people be willing to take it, I think.
Yes. And then, man, like, you just stimulate like so many thoughts, because and then after that happens, right? What are you doing when you're issuing this new currency? You're not issuing debt. You're just rolling out the new currency, right? So these aren't good developments one way or another if you value privacy or, individual freedom and liberty, right? These aren't good developments at all.
And someone in the chat mentions, how will they issue the Fed coin going to help with $22 trillion in debt? Easy. You can just roll over those digital dollars into the Fed coin, and because it's all the same. It's all digital illusions and distractions just on somebody's ledger. Problem is, it's going to be still controlled and implemented and given out by some supreme authority in the form of a Federal Reserve or whatever. And so for those that think that Trump is going to bring the Fed into the government, no matter what, they're still going to inherit and transfer over 23 trillion on book and 100 or some 20 trillion off book into one account still. So unless it's a complete flushing of the system or complete wiping away of the system, which means everybody loses everything they think they hold, if it's in paper and digital form, you're going to be willing to accept whatever they roll out because you don't want to take a haircut, even though everyone's going to take one anyway when it comes to purchasing power. So
yes, that's the thing, right? When this gets wiped out, whether it's through inflation, whether it's through Jubilee, whether it's through the reset into a digital brand new currency, Fed coin, when this gets wiped out, any kind of paper wealth is absolutely vanished. You're absolutely right with that. And then the shock is when, and this is what I keep saying, right? This is without a currency, but I think about Mexico, right? And I think about here, when I talk about, I think there's going to be a tenfold rise in inflation before this is all over. So instead of $3.50 bottles of ranch salad dressing, we're talking about $35 bottles of ranch salad dressing, because that's how the currency is going to be debased and devalued if we continue on the current U.S. dollar paradigm that we have right now. So that could help ease some of that pain of the developing crisis, in a sense that.
I'm sorry. So you're adding extra
350 to 35.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's right. So that's what I think is coming in a current dollar paradigm. So instead of $3.50 ranch, you're going to have $35 ranch. Instead of $150 tennis shoes, they're going to be $1,500. And instead of $1,000 plane tickets, they're going to be $10,000. This is what we're talking about with the loss of purchasing power. So if you inflate the U.S. dollar away under that scenario, then you're going to have torches and pitchforks in the streets. But if you roll out that new central bank digital currency, then it's going to be quite the shock and awe. People are just going to be in a mad scramble to adjust, and you might have less pitchforks and torches on the street because it's not building in a progressive momentum style, if that even made sense.
It does. Interesting. So as we get ready to wind down, economic ramifications. What are some things? So I know you keep an eye on a lot of the charts and the graphs. Give us, share with us. I think you sent me something about some of the true indicators of the fact that we are slowing down, and we are probably. Would you say, based upon this health scare situation and China shutting down and all the slowdown of things not taking place because of shipments not being made, that we are in a recession? Is this recessionary type stuff, or we still got some time?
Well, I think if they cancel the Tokyo Olympics in 2020 this summer, then we're in the economic collapse. So I think it's much worse than that. I think that we're already moving into a nasty global economic depression. I think it's unavoidable at this time. Today, two of the biggest names in business in the United States, Apple and Walmart, and they both, had troubles with their earnings report. Actually, Apple was yesterday, I think, after business hours. Can't remember which one was today, which one was yesterday. But at any rate, Apple came out and said they're having problems because of the virus, right? So they're admitting virus problems. I didn't look into the exact details other than they're having problems and giving warnings because of the virus. But then, curiously, Walmart came out and they're spinning their bad earnings report on slowing holiday shopping. So think about that, right? Walmart released their Q4 earnings and they're already scapegoating slow holiday shopping. So Walmart was already slowing down last year. I mean, it's only going to get worse from here. And these are and think about this, right? You got deep pockets in Walmart and in Apple, right? What happens to the other countries that don't have those deep pockets? And secondly, what are Apple and Walmart known for? They're known for strong arming the Chinese. How do you get iPhones built dirt cheap? And how does Walmart get stuff where they can shave a penny off of it and increase their profit margin just by half a penny? Well, they get it by strong arming their contractors and their suppliers. So, just all around, this does not spell good news whatsoever. I'm starting to read that Mexico is now preparing for problems in the auto industry. And you know what their response is? They're just going to import more stuff from Canada and the United States. But if Canada and the United States are in their own problems, I mean, how in the world are they going to do that? I mean, people don't understand that this is going to be nasty all the way around. So we see auto problems in Japan with Nissan. We see auto problems with Fiat in Serbia. We see auto problems with Hyundai in South Korea, all the car companies in China, right? So there's just no way to avoid this. We're way past entering a recession. We're entering a global depression right now. If we cancel the Olympics, it's the economic collapse.
Ooh, if we cancel the Olympics, it's the epic economic collapse. So yeah, so
think about this. One last point about that Olympics, right?
Yeah, no problem.
A lot of people talk about asymptomatic transmission, and we talked about that, a long time ago. Might have been even on that very first one on January 20th before other people started talking about it. But that's where someone can transmit the virus when they're not showing any signs or symptoms of being infected. Think about an Olympic athlete, right? They're like premier. They're like super strong. They're fit. They're physically fit. They're healthy. They're like, they're workhorses, right? So a person who's an Olympic athlete is the person who has the best chance of fighting off this infection. So in most cases, if people are just coming down with a case of a sniffles, it's going to be even less for an Olympic athlete. So you got prime breeding grounds to spread this thing when you got people coming in all over the world and then dispersing all over the world. So, and then just looking at these number of sporting venues that are being canceled, we talked about this last week, but they're starting to cancel stuff flat out outright. And they're not even postponing it. They're just canceling sporting events. They're moving events from Asia to like the Middle East, for example. So that's great. So instead of a bunch of Chinese competing in China, you're going to send them over to the Middle East and have the Chinese compete there, right? So, then the other thing is they're postponing them. And we're talking about delays that were, so there were some events in February. Then there were some events in February and March. Now there are events in April. And it's like every day, more sporting events keep getting postponed longer out into the calendar year. And that's just one simple dynamic, sports, right? Which is technically, we're not talking about agriculture. We're not talking about some vital, commodity one way or another. We're talking about sporting events, and that's major, major ramifications right now already.
Whew, Mr. Half Dollar, you gave us, that's a lot, man. And so once again, so you said that, so your measurement will be the cancellation of the Olympics. So if the Olympics is officially canceled, they would have to do that. And here's the thing. I think out of fear that they would hold off to the very last minute, because what will happen is they will be forced to cancel it if it gets to that point where countries just drop out. So if, like, for example, if President Trump decides to not send U.S. athletes and say we're going to sit out, then if you don't have the U.S. represented in that whole Olympics, there is no Olympics, because everybody wants to compete against the U.S. So U.S. is removed, then you got other countries, and then they're going to be forced to cancel it. But they would literally wait till like the week before, and it would have to be very, very, very scary out in these streets for a president of any country to say, no, we're not sending our people over there. And if that was to happen, I could see stuff really, really, really going belly up well before then, though.
Because think of all of the investment and the money that's already been spent and the debt that's already been created to build all these stadiums and get ready for all these athletes. I mean, you're talking about, just like we talked about the Chinese buying extra food for the restaurants in preparation for the Lunar New Year, you're talking about a ton of malinvestment. And that's just not something that can be brushed aside like, I guess we got to cancel it. It's not like canceling a wedding party, right? This is major.
Yeah, I agree. All right, with that being the case, we're about to get ready to dial back. I think we've touched on a lot of issues and definitely something to think about. So with that being the case, if you've enjoyed the back and forth of this news stream, don't be afraid to give, as well as this information here, share that if you believe it's of importance, because once again, more people need to hear about these things, and you won't hear them from your mainstream news the way it comes from us. So this is afternoon, Mr. Half Dollar. It's always a blessing to kick it with you. Thank you for the show. Everybody be tomorrow on tomorrow. We got to figure out that. I'm not sure if we're going to do it or not. But anyway, we'll be back at it again another day. So be blessed, be safe. Peace.